It has been quite some time since I have logged on here, and I've had sort of dreams and aspirations of picking this channel back up and using it to talk about books, the things I love, authors, probably more of a focus on contemporary writers, particularly now that, for the most part, it seems literary fiction has been sort of swept aside to the dustbin of kind of a niche interest. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. And it's not necessarily my goal or even idea to get into any of that because I think it's pretty well trodden ground. What I'd like to do instead is just talk about the stuff that I like, what I've been reading, what I am looking forward to reading, in the hopes that it will inspire conversation, connection, the same kind of reasons that I initially did this. I really didn't put myself out there in any meaningful way in internet or public or whatever until I started this channel, and that led to a lot of great things. Like I met people through this, and then I started working on my own writing, got my first book published, and found a sort of small but vibrant community. And part of me wants to show that off. I want to do more interviews on this channel now. I'd like to do more discussion types where me and a buddy, me and a friend read a book together and get on here and talk about it. And today's is going to be just sort of a re-intro of figuring out, can I still talk with zero notes, completely unprompted, the way I like to do, in a sort of rambly manner that is in some way interesting about my reading life. I think I'm going to change the channel to This Reading Life. If it's not taken, I'll have to look. I'm terrible with like branding and cleverness and stuff, but I do think that would maybe be more accurate and sort of, I'll just say before I get into what I've been reading and what's coming up for me as far as reading, I do want to say that I think there's a lot of value, not a lot of value, like a ton of value in reading fiction and reading difficult fiction, even in reading fun fiction, but in that process of full focus and attention and the symbiotic relationship in a way between the consciousness of the writer you're reading and your own consciousness, and the way that those things bounce off and affect each other across time and space are far more fascinating to me than our current culture of sort of, setting aside the unreality of so much of it, just sort of the bite-sized nature of our attention and how we kind of quickly shift, including myself, from one thing to the next thing to the other. And we take in all these inputs, but often without like the focus that would be required to understand them or to analyze them, to question them, those sorts of things. And I think there's still a ton of value in putting on a great jazz record or whatever your taste is, and literally focusing only on listening. And I think there's a ton of value similarly in instead of carrying around the phone constantly and at every sort of bus stop and waiting station in our life, picking that up and seeing if we can get a little dopamine, or if somebody said something, liked something you said or whatever, that stuff that kind of can distract you from the real. I think it's much more valuable to carry around someone else's work. So I'm not going to go too far on that, but if there's a thesis statement to what I want to do, that's it. I started this channel off actually when I was first doing translated literature. One of the ideas I had was, my kids were much younger, right? My kids now my daughter's 12 or about to be 12, and my son's 14. And when they were much younger, I had sort of a complex about how much I read, because like we would be in the living room and there'd be like music on or maybe a show that they were watching something, and I'm sort of in the corner reading, and I used to think like, oh, I hope they don't like think of their childhood as like dad was always in the corner reading, And I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll talk about these books. And so when I'm gone, many years from now, hopefully the video will still be there, and you can look and see. Or all right, when Dad was in his mid-30s, and not anymore, but when he was younger and started this, like, what were the things that he was interested in? Because I couldn't yet talk to them about a lot of those themes and stuff, but I knew that if I could sort of immortalize it in some way by making something like this, that they would eventually get to understand, like, the way that I thought and the things I was thinking about, what mattered to me, what mattered during our time to me, all those kind of things. Well, now I'm trying something a little more contemporaneous. I hope a little more like of a sort of broader appeal than just, hey kids, your dad's like reading stuff and it's interesting, and kind of wanting to, I see less and less of these sort of conversations of, for good reason, like there's less and less people reading these kind of books. But for those of us that are, I think it almost makes it more important that we talk about them and we share our passion. So I'm going to go unprompted through some books I've been enjoying lately. One that has been that I'm working on over time, and then two that I'm reading right now, very purposefully together, which we'll get to. The first one I want to talk about, I got clued in on. This is Service by John Tottenham from Semiotext, which one of my friends, Josh Sherman, that's like his favorite press or label, whatever you call it, and he loves their autofiction stuff. I have read 4 or 5 things on there, but kind of like didn't even know it was that right press, like, while I was reading it. But this was hip to me from Beyond the Last Estate, an excellent print magazine. It'd be nice if I had one right here to pull out, but I do not. That is done out of, I believe, around Joshua Tree, out the desert out there, and done by the author, journalist, musician extraordinaire Gabriel Hart and friends. And they did a cover story and great piece on Tottenham and on this book. And Service is a fantastic book for us readers and writers because it just is a very sort of cynical look at the service industry through the eyes of a writer who is, unemployed as a writer now. And so he goes to work at a bookstore, and the buzzing of the cell phones and the people coming in and everything just drives him absolutely crazy. And meanwhile, of course, about quarter way through, he realizes that he's writing the book that he didn't think he could write. And I think that a lot of it is sort of about what an artist is in this day and age. And I think you'll find that what a writer is, what an artist is in this day and age is going to be a thematic element, not only that I'm interested in, but that anyone in this milieu is going to be interested in, because it's a pressing question. A book I liked a whole lot, going back to some roots for this channel and for me, because we're not going to talk at all without Bolaño. I think Bolaño stuff is very funny, right? This is The Insufferable Gaucho by Roberto Bolaño. This one is translated by Chris Andrews, and it is a picador? Okay, picador. I like to say all the little things. But there have been so many things, like basically like scraps of stories that are left in trunks or whatever. Maybe it's not quite that Fernando Pessoa, but that kind of thing where the literary estate has then put it out perhaps as its like own thing, and that hasn't really worked. I felt that way about Cowboy Graves, for instance, and several other things. So I thought this was going to be something similar. This was a situation where I was like in a New England bookshop or something, and I had just finished the large book I was reading, and just came across it, and again thought it was sort of similarly in that vein. But actually, these are pretty like completed stories, and you can definitely see how it connects to sort of his broader masterpieces, both in the recurrence of characters and themes, but also you can see him kind of working through what it is he's trying to, well, I guess this whole world that he kind of creates of these cross boundaries, like sort of international romantic vision of these poets and downcasts, and there being a mystery to it and an allure. And I think it's what drew a lot of us, like readers and writers, into it, because it was such a romantic vision that felt not real and somewhat unattainable. It felt like it was existing in a parallel reality that we'd perhaps like to live in, although perhaps not, as we'll get to what I'm reading on now. But we'll save that. But it did deal with an artistic movement, a scene, and these are excellent stories. And actually, I've kind of come to think that if you've never read Bolaño and you're just interested because you've heard the name so much and all the hype, maybe don't go right to 2666. Maybe don't go right to Savage Detectives. I mean, those are two of my favorite books, obviously. Third Reich being my third favorite, and I think the most underrated Bolaño, and I have a video on that here. But I think the stories are a good way to get into, do you like the pacing? Do you like the style? Do you like how much is omitted that perhaps shouldn't be? All those kind of things. So, loved that. Next up, very important to me personally, the new Granta. I don't think there's been one since this one. This is number 172. And it's got, all the heavy hitters, as usual, including Any or No. But it's the cover story. William T. Vollmann Goes to Ukraine is the reason I got this book. It was what I was most interested in. Vollmann is a writer that I have, like many people, read a couple of books and yet couldn't have even touched the tip of the iceberg of his entire canon, because he writes an unbelievable amount, almost difficult to keep up with. Next year, I think I am going to do a group read, and probably on this channel we'll talk about it. There's an excellent podcast, Vollmania, that a friend of mine does, Ryan, and I'm going to be following that. But he comes out next year with Table of Fortune, which is a box set. It's a huge, thousands of words following the late 20th century into the 21st, the War on Terror, the CIA, and also a personal story as well, which is what he does, in my opinion, very, very well, when he takes the personal in parallel with sort of the geopolitical. I'm most interested because the book I'm editing now, and what will be my second book, deals with the war in Ukraine, at least in some ways. And I am not dealing with it as a writer in a direct, battlefield way, right? Boots on the ground type way. I'm doing something a little different, but I wanted to read Vollmann, who is an excellent reporter. He's an excellent travel writer. He goes into war zones famously. He has been in some very precarious situations. People around him have lost their lives. He's actually been in the shit, so to say. And so this was called Drones and Decolonization. All the photographs are his. He's also an acclaimed photographer. And I just want to impress upon people that if you don't have time for something like Table of Fortune, which I completely understand, or even any of his works, I think this is a great way to read him and to understand what his concerns are, which are humanity in this time, and where we find that humanity and all of the contradictions and all of sort of the political war and destruction, pain, suffering, hopelessness, all of that stew that does exist in the modern world and shows no signs of letting up, looking for those the pieces of humanity within it and getting on the ground. And so I really respect William Vollmann, love William Vollmann, and this is a great article. Now, another favorite author, contemporary of mine, who I've talked about on this channel before, been lucky enough to correspond with him. Fantastic dude. He's a teacher of creative writing, I believe, in Eastern Washington University. I could be totally off. Anywhere. I live in the South, so all that whole Northwest section, and I don't know a lot about it. But he is, in my opinion, as far as from his age, he's probably early to mid 30s, the best right now. I really believe that. Now, has he written his masterpiece yet? Probably not. So there is an element of enjoying watching the process, but he is similar to Vollmann in some ways. He is prolific, obviously not the same word counts, but publishes a ton and across a lot of different independent presses. Like, is somebody that really has these artistic obsessions that are fascinating. So we're talking about Grant Maierhofer and three recent books of his that I loved. I'll talk about real quick, actually in order that I enjoyed them. I enjoyed all three, but Hidden World is if you're into UFOs, government conspiracies, anything like that, this is sort of a collection about UFOs and about the uncovering of conspiracies, these documents, and it's a different, it's a different read. There's a lot of redactions throughout it that are purposeful. He does a lot of really interesting things with his actual text. Like, it's, he has had a couple of books on Inside the Castle, which does probably the most interesting textual work of any press now. And he continues to, utilize the book as a physical object in a way. And I enjoyed this. The only reason it's the third of the three for me on these is it happens to be a subject I was obsessed with for some period of time, and I read a lot of the firsthand reports and the accounts, and I forget the woman's name right now, but there was a woman who was churning out a ton of books, and she had a New York Times article kind of famously during the first Trump administration that kind of said, oh yeah, she was on to more stuff than we knew. So in this time of, who knows what is sort of happening at these larger levels and stuff, I think there's an interest there. And if you've never delved into UFO stuff, great read. But these two I actually connected with much more. The first one is Traumnovelle, and this is really fascinating. So I like Matthew Spector actually has a blurb on the front, and I loved his book, Crashing in the Same Car, Always Crashing in the Same Car. His book about living in LA, a memoir and literature. And he talks about, the reason I mentioned that is he has a thing in the blurb. Blurbs are usually obviously totally uninteresting, but this one I liked a lot. He said, Grant Maierhofer may be our greatest living novelist of failure. And I don't know that I agree with that, but it's one of those statements I really like. Okay. And what I mean by that is it hints at something, that ties in all of his work. I think he's a little young, and both in his career and in real, in actual age to have that quite yet. But it now has me thinking that way about his work and seeing if I can connect to those pieces. And one of my favorite things in the world is when a reader that you really respect, in this case, Matthew Spector would 100% be one. I did not get into Thomas McGuane without Matthew Spector, because that's a writer that he admires a lot. And in his book, he talks about a lot, and it blew my mind. I loved it. But he's a reader I really respect. And when there's a view that you've never thought of before, some connection you haven't made, and maybe this is why I like to do this, it's very powerful and important to me. And I like that, because I do think that can connect more than just that symbiotic relationship where, it's Grant Maierhofer's work and it's my consciousness interpreting. And so there's that connection. Now there's other voices in, right? These chorus of readers that are all connecting us. And it brings in other perspectives that you, from your own experience, life, and your own, where all the things you've read, all the inputs you've gotten, right, don't connect. But then you sort of are on the lookout for it. But this was it's about a terrible story. Anatoly, I'm going to pronounce this so badly, but Anatoly Burgorsky, a Russian physicist who survived exposure to a proton beam from a particle accelerator. And it's told in, very sort of dispatched, ways here. It goes through his interiority while it's happening. And it is a tremendous book. I have these flags that I have not looked at. And so I think what I'm going to do for this one real quick, because I like to do it, is I will just read real quick the little entries that I flagged. And again, no prep, don't know why I flagged it, but if I flagged it, it means it was something that spoke to me, and maybe it'll speak to you. So 006. There is only work, the machine, a particle accelerator, a long cycle through which the crude elements of matter can be made to collide, a kind of experiment extending then from every national impulse to conquer, to see, to ruin, to persist. That's fantastic. Every national impulse. Okay. 009. The U-70 synchrotron is the largest of these accelerators on Earth. The amount of I have my flag over that word. The amount of coiled wires contained therein is nearly impossible to conceive of, and without easy comparison beyond other similar machines, though all were smaller then. A marvel on a scale with precedent only in great cathedrals, fortifications, which were made across centuries. I remember why I flagged that there. I'm very interested in the way that science believes that it is religion. And as I've gotten older, I've come to see that as somewhat sinister, actually. And the idea of the particle accelerator as a great cathedral has a sinister feel to me. 73, it's like a scale applied to reality. It's like a scale applied to reality. I have this one marked off because in the first sentence, there's no comma. It is like a scale applied to reality. In the second sentence, there's a comma after scale. It is like a scale applied to reality. I flag that because it shows power of a comma in how you read it and how a writer can guide a reader how to read it based on those simple little commas. Last one I'll do, 231. High energy beams of particles can be used for selective destruction of specific areas of the brain. That which mirrors itself in language, language cannot represent. That which mirrors itself in language, language cannot represent. I have nothing to say about that, and I find it fascinating. It's something I would like to think more about. Last one I read of his, Maintenance Art, which I think is his strongest narrative voice. I think this might end up being the book. If someone asks me what's the first Grant Maierhofer book I should read, I think this will be that book. And it is about the wife of an artist who is a very eccentric, making very elaborate, almost Synecdoche, New York type installation stuff, and the same time, they have a son who is getting increasingly sick in very bizarre kind of ways, and all of these things are colliding. I'll just kind of say that. I think that's the best way to sort of put it. But there is a lot in here about obsessiveness of art, about sort of sacrifices, those kind of things. And it's also a haunting and disturbing book. Let me get the presses on all these. This is Sublunary Editions. One of my favorite presses, again, when it comes to the book as object. This is Joshua Roths, who also does the indispensable distribution company for independent books, Asterism Books, which he does out of Seattle. Excellent press. Great book. Traumnovelle is from... I'm kind of embarrassed that I don't like... Erratum Press. Okay. It's from Erratum Press out of Sheffield, UK. Oh, Angascar Allen. Okay, actually, I do know this press. I didn't think I did, but I do. Okay. Awesome. Very unique press. And where is the other one I had? Hidden World. Hidden World is... I think this is a press I had never heard of. Like I said, Grant does a lot of different... Yeah, Cloak. Learn more at cloak.wtf. Well, that's kind of cool. A lot of different presses, which I kind of like. Like, I struggle so much with what to do with this next book. I might end up actually self-publishing for some reasons that are make sense thematically with the book. But I like how his stuff is sort of spread out. We're all in this, like, Bolaño used to talk about, like, he would hunt for prizes, like literary prizes across Europe. He would just, like, put a story, a poem in wherever, and he was like, felt like he was on the hunt for prizes. I feel like we are now in an era where we're on the hunt for readers. And I like that style of all these different presses, because usually the way it works with indie presses is like there's a small built-in audience of people who they're going to kind of buy everything that press does. I believe Sublunary has that. A couple of the others I'm about to talk about here in a moment. We'll talk about it at the end. But Expat and Rose Books, two indie presses, respected, well regarded. Rose, much newer. I think this is only their fourth book. Is that right? Yeah. Expat, been around for a long time, have a lot of books. But very different tastes and sensibilities, though, too. It's not to compare them. But, I think with each of those, right, there is, and Sublunary is sort of similar. Inside the Castle would be similar. Apocalypse Press. Anyway, all these, or Apocalypse Party, sorry, your numbers. They have like their little, like kind of a built-in, like, I trust this person's taste. Because at the heart of a press is just one person that has a taste, has a vision, and really cares, deeply obsessed about this stuff. And so you kind of know, like, if they put something out, like, I'm going to like it, and you got that little readership. And if you stay as an independent writer and you're just, constantly on one press, then, like, that's sort of your readership. Whatever you gain and sort of as well, people find your voice, they like you. But I actually like on that hunting style that I was just talking about, like Grant Maierhofer style of being at a lot of different presses, right? And submitting a lot of different things. And he's got a way, I think, there to reach a lot of different readers. I mean, he's got a book on Fiction Collective too, which is like, for dorks like me, huge. I think he does have something coming out. I'm not going to like say that because I think that might not be like official or whatever on a much larger press. It's a nonfiction thing. But anyway, I like that style, and I like how he throws this stuff sort of in all these different corners because you are hunting all these different readers. All right, real quick, the book I've been working through slowly is Volume 1 of Peter Weiss's The Aesthetics of Resistance. Speaking of, earlier I was talking about Vollmann, my friend Ryan. This is how I got hipped onto this because it was an obsession of his, I think for a year, maybe 2 years. He talked about it a lot, and so I was very interested. And this, in our time, is a very timely book. And it's sort of about art and artist collectives in the time of the rise of fascism and how they used art, community and collective action and things like that, but mostly art to fight that. And I have enjoyed it. I very much enjoy the scene setting, if you will. But it is a bit, in my opinion, of a slog. As you can see here, there are very, very little breaks for you. And it is definitely, in my view, a 5 to 6 pager a night. You're definitely going to come away with a little bit of that buzzing feeling. A lot of the historical things will connect to today, but also I think there's just something beautiful about young people making art together, and that being kind of a unifying theme. Even taking away the politics, which that book would never do. That book is very overtly political, but it also still delves into the many sort of complications that come with artistic scenes. Real quick, I did read the newest from Thomas Pynchon. I think when people pronounce it like that, it's like so snobby. Pynchon, right? Like Thomas Pynchon. Shadow Ticket. And the only thing I want to say about this is, for so much of the like hype around this book, like I think it's sold pretty well. Like when I talk to my friends who like run bookstores and stuff like that, like it did pretty well, right? And it comes on the heels of Paul Thomas Anderson doing One Battle After Another, which was a Vineland, was inspired by Vineland. So it was kind of like a moment for Pynchon. Pynchon's probably 88 now, 87, something like that. So definitely a feeling of it. Could be his last book, although we've heard some rumors since then from, I think it was a playwright who shares an agent with him, that he has at least one more and possibly two that are like in the can, ready to roll. But anyway, I just want to make a point to say that I have such, like a lot of readers, complicated relationship with Pynchon. I mean, he's written some of my favorite books, specifically Vineland is probably my favorite of his. And I've still never made it past page 60 of Gravity's Rainbow, and eventually I will, hopefully, live long enough, right? And it'll connect with me at the right time. Mason-Dixon, which is many people's favorites, I found excruciating. And everyone you talk to about Pinja kind of has this story, but it'll be different books that they pick out. And I found that really interesting. Shadow Ticket, it's like Inherent Vice, where it's just fun. Like, there doesn't need to be a lot of like depth and deep. Like, I saw some of the reviews trying to tie it into like, he's making a comment about our time. No, this is a fun noir kind of caper. There's action scenes with ridiculous names and setups and Pensionian stuff happening that is just fun and funny and silly to read. I mean, it's almost cartoonish, and yes, there are connections to, you know, union busting and the politics of the time, and but that stuff is, at least to me, it feels sort of like aesthetic, not necessarily. They're just sort of the accoutrements of the fun, right? Like, I really believe that. Like, I don't think there's some great overarching thing that he is trying to tell us. And I think that the idea that writers are doing that always, or that is even the goal of fiction, is kind of silly. Like, Shadow Ticket's really fun to read. That's it. All right, let me end. I'm at 30 minutes, which is crazy. So if you stuck with me, thank you. It'll help me a lot. Like, I know that whole like, share, subscribe. What's going to motivate me is if people are interested in this. Okay. If you're not interested in this, then it's sort of a narcissistic thing that, you know, I will go on and probably just feel bad about myself and be like, listen, you're just being a narcissist. Like, stop talking in front of a camera to nobody about books you like. But if you do like it, drop a comment and tell me something you'd like to see on the channel, whether it's an interview, whether it's a book you'd like to read. If you want to do a buddy read and talk about it on here, if you think there's somebody that I should interview, I see a pop-up here that says add effects using hand gestures. I guess because I'm using my hand. I dislike everything about modernity. I mean, at least in terms of this stuff. Anyway, sorry. Let me know. Talk to me. Tell me something. Did you read one of these? You know, whatever, that kind of stuff. The things I'm reading right now, in tandem, are two New York authors. And two New York authors working right now. Matthew Gasda, Writer's Diary. I keep pressing the wrong one. From Rose Books. As I said, it's Rose Book's fourth one. I, again, want to shout out, this is a beautiful book as object. And I actually was a subscriber to Matthew's Substack during most of these. So I'm sort of most interested in how it, because it takes from his Substack, A Writer's Diary, which is a very regular thing where it's just, you know, little dispatches and thoughts throughout the day, sort of like notes, you know. But very, very thematic in terms of, you know, he is living and working in the New York scene as it is now, you know, and his play Dime Square sort of defined in some ways the New York scene. I think his play now is called The Last Days of Downtown. His play Zoomers had a lot to do with AI, and he is, Sam Altman, he is connected in many ways to the zeitgeist at this moment, and I'm always going to be very interested in that. But what I most like about Matthew's work is he talks about not just scenes, but the purpose, back to something we were talking about a little bit earlier, of a literary endeavor at this time and literary friendships. And it's got some of that, you know, the sourness that you see in some of these other books when we're talking about literary scenes and stuff. But there's also a very personal and private kind of, you know, how he is experiencing as an artist working today, both as a playwright, a director, and a writer. And I think that he taps into it. And I think that his writing is very good. I also think that he taps into a world that I don't know. Like, I only know New York through Twitter, through, you know, I mean, I've been there, you know, twice in the past 5 years. I've read there twice, but like, what do you know, you walk into a bar there and you read in front of the 14 people that you knew you were going to see there. And it's like, you didn't get New York, right? And you can't get New York because of the sheer size and because of all the things it means and all these kind of tentacles and all that stuff. But this guy's in the belly of the B7 every day, as is this guy. And I'm fascinated with that because it is still a place where people come for that sort of sustenance. Now, Bodycount by Manuel Marrero on Expat. I love this cover, by the way. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. Again, look at that. No blurb, nothing. Go right into it. It is, so far, because I'm reading these in tandem, a religious text, definitely. I don't know that he would like me saying this, but it is somewhat political. It is definitely looking at a how to live, but privately. Like, it isn't as interested in... Like, whereas Gasda will be interested in a scene, Marrero is not. Marrero is interested in the individual and how to live, how to exist, and how to, truthfully, I think in many ways, rebel against sort of mainstream narratives, rebel against an idea that a writer or a person has to be one way in order to be seen, read, heard. It is sort of iconoclast. It is so far very biting, personal. It's an angry work, but it centers itself through this religious awakening that has clearly occurred before the start of the book, but we see it sort of so far. We see it sort of ratchet up, and I don't know where it's going to go. I truly don't, and I'll talk about it, both these later when I'm done. But I wanted to give you a little bit of what I was reading. I don't know where it's going to go because part of me wonders if it's going to, be a snake eating itself. I don't know. It could be that, and I don't mean that negatively. What I mean by that is that there's so much interiority that, and so much sort of focus on that relationship between the author and God, sort of eschewing the world, that I wonder if it's a retreat away from society, whereas I don't think Matthew Gasda's work is like that. And quite in fact, the opposite. I think it's sort of like, this is what we're living in now, and I'm going to report on it as I experience it. Whereas there is a lot more anger in Manny's work, and I mean that in a good way, because anger is a fantastic emotion to write with and through. And it also it has strands of body count's the name of it, so you can sort of see how, but strands of trying to find real romantic connection. And in this day and age, like, I'm blessed enough to be happily married and did so before the onset of having to do that basically through apps and things like that, and sort of this world of attention and clout and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't have to worry about that. Manny does, right? Because he's a publisher of a popular press. And so there's a transactional relationship that he finds often amongst people that he meets, and he's looking for the exact opposite. So there's a pity, you feel for him in those instances and in those scenes, because he just never can know when someone's coming at him, like whether it's out of a place of pureness and love and true interest and curiosity about who he is, or if they just want something from him because they think he can give him something. So anyway, that's what I'm reading now. Whew, long time. I think I still got it. I'm going to be doing a free writing workshop. It's going to be starting up in January. If you follow me on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call that, I'm going to post dates for that. The first one went really well. We did it in the spring. And the other things I want to do is I'd like to do this on an every other week basis. I don't want to, put too much out there because I think there's too much out there, but would love to do some interviews, talk more about books, go more in depth on particular books that really, really hit me. And anyway, thanks for watching. This was fun to do. And even if I don't do one for another 2 years because there's no interest, I think it was still worth 40 minutes of my time. Hopefully it was yours too.